Hi, guys. So, we've all seen the Barbie movie teaser trailer by now, right? It's safe to say everyone's pretty excited for it, myself included, of course. We haven't even gotten an actual full trailer yet, or even a proper plot summary. And yet, this movie has already become something of a phenomenon. Honestly, before we had any footage of this movie at all, it was already kind of a phenomenon. From the moment we got those first images of Margot Robbie in the rollerblades and the pink cowgirl jumpsuit, the internet has just been aflame over Barbie. Hype for the movie, it even inspired a pretty notable aesthetic trend dubbed Barbiecore, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Etsy trend expert Dana Issam Johnson defines Barbiecore as all about embracing vibrant hues, particularly the doll's signature hot pink, and calls it an 80s-inspired, unapologetically pink aesthetic. But Barbiecore isn't just about the color pink. It's about hyper-femininity and the expectations of dressing a quote-unquote girly. High heels, mini dresses, makeup, everything that's pretty natural to associate with Barbie. You know, the most culturally significant fashion doll, the figurehead for everything pink and sparkly and fashionable. Mattel has even leaned into this as well, making use of hashtag Barbiecore in their social medias, and using Barbiecore as a marketing tactic for selling pink Barbiecore themed merchandise on the Mattel Creations website. Listings for dolls will say things like, play out Barbiecore style with the dolls that inspired the trend. The Barbie movie trailer appears to lean into this as well. You know, you have the shot of Barbie stepping out of her high heels and her feet stay arched just like Barbie's so-called fashion feet. She wears frilly pink dresses and drives a pastel pink car through a sparkly, colorful Barbie wonderland. Everything that you would expect Barbie to be. But for me, speaking as a longtime doll collector, there's a bit of a disconnect here. Mattel is obviously benefiting from this Barbiecore trend. It's basically free advertising and appeals strongly to nostalgia. But the problem is that Barbie, modern Barbie specifically, is not very Barbiecore. Modern Barbie looks like this. In fact, a lot of the things we're considering Barbiecore, high heels, heavy makeup, blonde hair, pink, sparkles, hyperfemininity, these are things that Mattel has very specifically tried to distance Barbie from. Until extremely recently, they tried to completely scrub Barbie clean of the pink princess image she spent years building for herself. And I guess recent events have kind of proven that was more or less all for naught, but the question remains, why? Why does modern Barbie dress like her biggest style inspiration is a single issue of Cosmopolitan magazine from 2012? Why do the Barbies on shelves today look less like they run a thriving fashion empire and more like they just emptied their savings attempting to sell LuLaRoe leggings? Why does she look like she would describe her music tastes as really anything except country or rap? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be investigating today. Why and when exactly Barbie stopped being Barbiecore. The exact shift I'm talking about happened around 2014. But before we talk about the events surrounding this big rebranding of Barbie, we need to go back a little further and talk about what Barbie was doing before this rebrand. Barbie's obviously gone through a lot of different eras in her life. I think what we associate as being like most memorable peak Barbie, if you will, started around the 80s and continued into the 2000s. And Barbie usually more or less reflects the sensibilities of whatever time she's in. So around this time, we start to see her develop this very pink, very hyper-feminine persona. There's a good reason that Barbiecore is often described as 80s inspired, after all. And don't get me wrong, Barbie's obviously always been very feminine. But Barbie in the 60s and 70s, I think, is known for being a lot more sophisticated, if you will. She's more defined by very specific fashion trends and high fashion aesthetics. She's the fashion model. She's the all-American, down-to-earth beauty. Whereas later, she starts to become more imaginative and a little more, I guess, whimsical would be the word. For example, take a look at Barbie's astronaut outfit from 1965. It's simplified, obviously, but very much a realistic astronaut outfit. Then, in 1985, she's going into space in what's basically a sparkly pink disco jumpsuit. The commercial even shows her, taking off her helmet and dancing around a disco ball, and that's kind of a recurring thing for Barbie in this era. Even when she's, giving open heart surgery, she's gonna make sure she's dressed like a party could happen at any moment. One of the most iconic Barbies ever, A Day to Night from 1985, is Barbie as a capable career woman with a bright pink business suit that changes into this glamorous, sparkly party dress. And I think that's the part of Barbiecore that really resonates with people. It makes use of these things that aren't usually taken seriously. Traditional femininity is so often used to demean and belittle women and call them weak or stupid, but Barbie shows them as things of empowerment. Barbie is all these things: pink, feminine, fashionable, but she's also intelligent, hardworking, and successful, which, of course, Barbie was criticized for this as well. To a lot of people, Barbie's femininity was exaggerated, cartoonish, and stereotypical, offensive even. A 1987 New York Times article titled "Barbie, Doll, Icon, or Sexist Symbol" quotes filmmaker Todd Haynes. Barbie is a loaded cultural icon that stands for a whole prescribed femininity that little girls are confronted with at an early age. And that's a criticism of Barbie that's going to follow her basically throughout her entire life. Still, Barbie would persist. In the 90s and early 2000s, we would see Barbie kind of take a brief break from the Barbiecore and return to this more down-to-earth persona, which I don't think that was Mattel attempting to respond to these criticisms. I think it was, again, just reflective of the culture and fashion trends of the time. Working Woman Barbie from 1998 is very much like a reinvention of the Day to Night Barbie. She even has the same gimmick where her outfit turns into this cute party dress, but nary a stitch of pink in sight. Barbie in the Generation Girl line from 1999 wears blue more often than she does pink. Barbie in the My Scene spinoff from 2002, she does wear pink, but it's not her defining color until much later in the line. She's mostly, again, in blues and reds. The success of Bratz played a big role in this too, obviously, but that's kind of an entirely different topic. But then we get to the late 2000s and early 2010s, and we get what is probably the pinkest, sparkliest, most Barbiecore era of Barbie. I see a lot of people call this the Fashionista era because of the Fashionistas line introduced in 2009. The Fashionistas were intended to be just a basic line of Barbies. They're not specifically Barbie characters or her friends or anything. They don't even have names, but they're just trendy, posable dolls in cute outfits. So very much Barbie at her most bare essentials. And yeah, just looking at these, obviously they're very, very pink. They wear furs and mini skirts and stilettos and glittery mini dresses. They have very noticeable heavy makeup. And even the lines that weren't fashionistas, like the career line from this time, pretty much had the same design philosophies. Even when she's a doctor or a vet, her clothes aren't really designed for practicality, I should say. They're designed to be fun, colorful, campy, and very feminine. Another line that really defined this era of Barbie was definitely Life in the Dream House, which Life in the Dream House and fashionistas do kind of go hand in hand, but Life in the Dream House was a lot more character-focused. At this time, the dolls did have names, and they were characters who have been a part of a Barbie lore for some time now, like Teresa, Nikki, Raquel, Midge, and Summer. But the media surrounding Life in the Dream House is also important here. First off, if you haven't watched the Life in the Dreamhouse series, go do that. It's amazing. You won't be disappointed, I promise. But this series portrayed Barbie as, well, really everything that we tend to think Barbie is. She's perfect in every way. She never has any real problems, or if she does, she's able to do everything effortlessly and perfectly. She's incredibly fashionable and obsessed with the color pink. She has this impossibly huge closet filled with all the clothes you could possibly imagine. She's always walking around in heels and dressed in sparkly pink outfits. She's honestly kind of the antithesis to how Mattel wants Barbie to be seen today.
You know, I've had so many careers, it's hard to keep track of all 135 of them. And counting.
We also just need to take a moment and appreciate the Life in the Dreamhouse dolls and the fashionistas line it turned into. They really are just the ideal Barbies to me. They're so good. I don't know if this is a popular opinion or not, I just personally really love them. This era of Barbie is also the worst selling era of Barbie. It is actually probably one of the most financially devastating periods for Mattel in their entire history. And that's due to a lot of reasons, but Barbie sales falling was a pretty big factor. According to Time magazine, Barbie sales plummeted, yes, it actually does use the word plummeted, 20% between 2012 and 2014, and continued to fall even further into 2015. This, along with the fact that Mattel lost the Disney Princess and Frozen licenses to their competitor Hasbro, meant that Lego overtook Mattel's long-standing spot as the top toy company. And it wasn't just a bad period for Barbie, it was pretty bad for fashion dolls in general. And this was initially thought to be due to a shift in children just preferring electronic toys over more traditional ones. But looking back, it was more so to do with a big sort of cultural shift that was happening around the time, which was a huge pushback against what was called princess culture, against fashion dolls, and really most things that were specifically marketed to young girls. In 2011, author Peggy Ornstein released a book titled Cinderella Ate My Daughter, Dispatches from the Front Lines of the New Girly Girl Culture. In it, she harshly criticizes the commercialization of products aimed at young girls, particularly things like fashion dolls and Disney princesses. She denounces these things for being too limiting in the way they portray gender, and puts forth that they're likely to have harmful effects on a child's self-esteem or their development into adults. One quote from the book reads, "I often wonder what the long-term results of that change will be. Rather than raising a generation of Cinderellas, we may actually be cultivating a legion of stepsisters, spoiled, self-centered materialists, superficially charming but without the depth or means for authentic transformation." And I'm not here to argue with Peggy or say if she's right or wrong. I do think she brings up a lot of valid points, especially as a mother raising a daughter. That's a perspective I obviously don't have. I think some of her arguments kind of circle back to being somewhat misogynistic, though. There's times where she calls fashion dolls slutty and says really awful things about female celebrities. She also uses statistics and studies from before Disney princesses ever existed as proof that they're behind all these harmful effects, but I digress. This is not a book review channel. And my point is that this book specifically is really ground zero for this big shift against things like Barbie and fashion dolls. And it's not that these criticisms didn't already exist, but until now, they didn't really heavily affect Mattel's sales. It was a nuisance for Barbie to always be on the defensive, sure, but she had decades behind her of being a household staple and a cultural icon, but now that wasn't enough anymore. Criticisms for Barbie came from really three big areas. One, that she was too stereotypically feminine and therefore a poor role model for young girls. Two, that her body was unrealistically proportioned and set the stage for body issues later in life, and 3, that a combination of 1 and 2 meant that Barbie was too sexualized and inappropriate for young children to play with. She was also criticized pretty heavily for a lack of diversity, which is valid. The fashionistas line in particular was obviously very full of white dolls and not a ton of inclusivity. The Sew and Style line was running around this time, which was a line focused on black characters, but it wasn't super well distributed or promoted by Mattel. Marcy Warhaft Nadler, author of The Body Image Survival Guide for Parents, says, "Barbie sends our girls one message, and it's this. You can do anything and you can be anything as long as you look like this. Very tall, very thin, very Caucasian, and very beautiful." Josh Golan, associate director of the Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood, in 2014 spoke out against a partnership between Barbie and Girl Scouts. Mattel markets girls on the illusion of choice, telling them they can be anything. But really, of course, the goal is to limit choices to the Barbie brand. Traditionally, the Girl Scouts have represented everything Barbie is not. The Girl Scouts' mission is to build girls of courage, confidence, and character, while Barbie teaches girls to focus on appearance, outfits, and shopping. If you were on the internet at all around this time, I'm sure you also saw a ton of graphics that were like, if Barbie were a real woman, she'd look totally unrealistic, she couldn't even function correctly. Which, side note, sure, yes, but Barbie's also not a real person, nor was she designed to scale perfectly with a real human being. Her body had to be proportioned a certain way because fabric at such a small scale adds a lot of bulk, so she was intentionally stylized to accommodate that. I'm not saying body diversity isn't important, because it is. I just think that bit of context is pretty important, and yet not really discussed very often. Anyways, this would all come to a head when a certain person enters the fray. Enter Nikolai Lamb, a graphic artist who went viral in 2013 after creating what he dubbed, and I cannot stress enough that this is literally what he called her, Normal Barbie, in which he made a Barbie doll in Photoshop scaled down to the measurements of an average 19-year-old girl. It should be noted that Lamb does not have a background in doll design, but still decided he would ride off the popularity from that and turn the project into a real purchasable fashion doll that he called Lamely, which was successfully crowdfunded in 2014, earning over $500,000 in support from backers to make the Lamely doll a reality. Lamb is quoted in an Elle article saying, "If Barbie were a real woman, she'd be intimidating and cold, and what I like about real women is that they're warm and friendly. I just wanted to create an image that would reflect that." Which, I don't know if we have time to unpack that, but the thing about Lamely is that her entire advertising campaign hinged on the fact that she wasn't Barbie. She was the anti-Barbie. That was her whole thing, and she didn't really have a lot of appeal outside of that. But that's just indicative of how much animosity Barbie was facing from the public at the time. And Lamely is not a product for children. I mean, she is, but she's not. She's for parents to buy so they can feel like they're making a socially conscious decision. But that's the thing, right? Children aren't the ones making the purchasing decisions. Parents are. And it seemed pretty clear what they were looking for now. They didn't want Barbie, who was larger than life, glamorous, and thoroughly unrelatable. They wanted something more akin to Lamely, whose slogan was a resounding, "Average is beautiful." There's a part from the Lamely campaign video that lives rent-free in my head where Lamb, in like the most robotic way possible, is like, she has style. She wears minimal makeup.
She has style and wears minimal makeup.
It's just weird because I thought we weren't supposed to be defining women by their appearances, but in any case, all this media attention pointed to one thing, that some things needed to change, and Mattel would start addressing these criticisms in a few different ways. In 2014, Mattel launched the Barbie-style Instagram account. This started out as kind of a spoof on fashion Instagram accounts, with Barbie doing flat lays of her clothes and accessories and amateur fashion photography. But over time, it started to portray Barbie as a very specific kind of character. She's hardworking, and she drinks coffee and wears messy buns. Just like you, nostalgic millennial parent. It also portrayed Barbie as sometimes political and socially aware. In 2015, around the time Life in the Dream House was pretty abruptly canceled, Mattel launched a new series of animated shorts, Barbie Vlogs. In these, Barbie is a teenager, and really just your average, everyday teenager. And they were set up as if Barbie were a real social media influencer, doing things like makeup tutorials, challenges, or even just talking about her life, her problems, the way she deals with things like stress and sadness.
I don't always have to be upbeat and positive, and to expect that of myself isn't fair.
To capture the authenticity of an actual vlogger, the episodes were not heavily scripted, and the voice acting and motion capture animations were actually recorded in real time. Mattel was now really going out of their way to portray Barbie as average and relatable as possible. And these would both bring Mattel a lot of really positive attention. The Barbie-style Instagram would launch a line of exclusive dolls inspired by the fashions featured on the account, and the Barbie and the Barbie vlogs would go on to star in all the Barbie media, the movies and the webisodes. No longer was Barbie a princess, a model, a glamorous figure with a million careers. Now she's just your average girl next door. The Barbie products would, of course, reflect this change in marketing as well. For one, she would get a brand new face. Now, every era of Barbie has a pretty identifiable face to go with it. You know, there was the first head mold with the really sharp, sleek eyes. The 80s had the superstar head mold with the big eyes and was usually printed with very bright blue eyeshadow. The 2000s and 2010s had the Generation Girl sculpt, which was a little more mature and glamorous. Starting in 2015, we have the Millie sculpt. Now, if you're not new here, you know I do not like the Millie sculpt. I am not a fan. I do think she can look good depending on how she's screened, but for the vast majority of Millies, they very intentionally do not give her face a lot of definition or detail, and it's because they specifically wanted Barbie to look more youthful, more approachable, more natural. They also completely revamped the Fashionistas line. Rather than the Life in the Dream House method of using established characters, it became more about finding a Barbie doll that looks like you. They wanted to be as diverse and inclusive as possible, which according to a CNN article, the first wave of new fashionistas in 2015 included 8 skin tones, 14 facial structures, 22 hairstyles, 23 hair colors, and 18 eye colors. And I want to be clear, this is objectively a good thing. I have my criticisms of modern Barbie, but it will never be that she's too diverse or too inclusive. But you can really start to see here this new emphasis on realism. The clothes, I'm not going to say they're horrible or ugly, but they're very, average, which was exactly what they were going for. A lot of these changes are traced back to a woman named Evelyn Mazzocco, who became the head of the Barbie brand in 2014, which was a deliberate effort by Mattel to find new ways to combat Barbie's falling sales. In a video with Time magazine, she says that Barbie's rebranding was inspired by what we were seeing on social media about Barbie. Does she really know what's happening in the world today? She seems a little out of touch. It was driven by moms and saying like, I don't think that there's a Barbie that really speaks to me. Then in 2016, they would take it a step further, adding new body types to the Barbie lineup for the very first time. Tall, petite, and curvy. Which is, again, I think entirely a good thing. But this new wave of fashionistas, despite their name, were... what's the word here? decidedly unchic, even by 2016 standards of fashion. Originally, this was kind of written off as a logistical thing. See, Barbie dolls had a uniform body type because they're made to be dressed and redressed. It's kind of her primary function as a fashion doll. So it was necessary on some level that all Barbies be able to share clothes with one another. Designing clothes for 4 different body types, all under the same brand, was kind of a new venture, and so they defaulted to pretty simple designs.
So this change of including more diversity, and which includes the 3 new body types, does create a level of complexity as relates to the product design. So it does impact fashions. It does impact the accessories.
It was also kind of a budget thing. Mattel had been losing a lot of money up to this point, and creating new body sculpts for fashion dolls is a really expensive venture. So this was actually a pretty big risk for Mattel, and unfortunately they didn't have a ton of funding to contribute to extremely elaborate outfits. This was all part of an advertising campaign that Mattel titled The Doll Evolves, that really solidified exactly what this new direction for Barbie was. Less of a focus on fashion or glamour, and much more of a focus on Barbie being a realistic role model. Still aspirational, but in the sense that she's meant to be a more or less a very realistic human woman. And Barbie would also turn to real human women too, through their Inspiring Women series, which was a line of dolls based on real women in history, both historical and ones that are still alive and active today. Which, all this emphasis on being real and average, I honestly think kind of presents a new problem. Because yes, you have the diversity, you have the different body types, all that's great, but why does being diverse also mean you have to lack imagination? Why can't a larger body type or these different skin tones also be glamorous and hyper-feminine? It's great for a doll to have a thicker waist, but if you're going to put her in a baggy t-shirt dress with no body definition, how is that any different than how we've been treating larger body types in fashion up to this point? What exactly is subversive about that? Does setting realistic expectations for children mean removing all the creativity and imagination from their play? I mean, when kids imagine Barbie running for president, do they also imagine another Barbie in a white t-shirt and distressed jeans with an I voted sticker standing next to her? It's interesting because you don't really see a lot of boys' toys that face the same criticisms. You know, I've literally never seen anyone say that Rescue Heroes sets an unrealistic expectation of what it's like to pull civilians out of a burning building. But God forbid Barbie bedazzle her beekeeping outfit and set an impossible standard of womanhood. Like earlier, I brought up Barbie in the late 90s and early 2000s and how she had distanced herself from the more eccentric, super pink aesthetic of the 80s and started incorporating more realistic, more practical fashions. They looked like clothes that someone would actually wear, but at no point did they stop being fashionable or glamorous, you know? I just wish we could meet somewhere in the middle. I want the diversity and the inclusion of modern Barbie, but with all the fun and the fashion of past Barbie. Because I don't really think it's a bad thing to be a fashionable fashion doll. I think dolls should be able to reflect a wide variety of interests and hobbies, but I think Mattel is trying to expand Barbie's reach a little too far, to the point where they want her to go beyond being a fashion doll to something more like an educational toy. Which I'm not saying that dolls like that shouldn't exist or that Barbie can never be educational, but when I look at a lot of Barbies from 2016 onwards, I get the same impression I did with Lamely, that they're not really for kids, they're for the parents who don't want to feel alienated or intimidated by a doll that is too fashionable or unapproachable or, worse, controversial. So, yeah, that's why Barbie stopped being Barbiecore. And I don't want you to come out of this video thinking that modern Barbie is just like unsalvageable garbage, because she's not. Like I said, she's doing some cool things, and she has some pretty decent lines here and there. But Barbiecore, she is most certainly not. And in fact, has made every effort to be as possibly un-Barbiecore as she could possibly be. But I'm glad to see that a lot of people still remember Barbie the same way I do, as unapologetically glitzy and girly and fun. Barbie was one of the first outlets I ever had to express the love I had for fashion. And as much as she was criticized for being a poor role model, she was one of the first female role models I ever had. And I saw someone who was powerful, who was intelligent, who was beautiful, and who taught me that loving all these things, frilly pink dresses, cute animals, fairy tales, mermaids, that didn't mean I was any less smart or gifted for it. Just like her, I could still do anything. But my experience is not universal, I know. Some people have a very negative relationship with Barbie, and I'm not here to say those experiences are invalid. And for those people, maybe this new, average, and relatable Barbie plays a much more positive role for them, which is great. Obviously, it's a very complicated discussion with a lot of nuance, and I'm not going to tell you how to think or how to feel about Barbie. These are just my personal thoughts. But yeah, I guess that more or less covers it. I don't know how the Barbie movie will affect future Barbie products. Some people are estimating that it's going to signal a rebrand into a more glamorous era of Barbie. I'm not so optimistic, but I am curious to see where it goes either way. As long as we get some dolls of Margot Robbie in those outfits, I'll probably be happy. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to leave all your thoughts down below. Tell me what you think of modern Barbie. Do you like the rebrand? Do you hate it? Do you wish she'd go back to how she was? Type it all out. Tell me all about it. And when you're done with that, just be sure to like and subscribe for any future fashion doll content. Thank you.